Brace yourself for what I'm about to tell you, an experience that has forever marked my existence. I don't even know if this is the right place for a story like this, but I feel a visceral need to share it, to put it into words. I've told everyone I know, family, friends, neighbors, even some local journalists. But it's never enough. I feel a strange, inexplicable compulsion to inform as many people as possible about what happened to me. I'm writing these lines in November 2019, but the story goes back much further. We're talking more than 7 years ago. I don't remember the exact year, but it must have been 2012, maybe 2013. I was 25, had a stable job and a girlfriend who is now my wife. I hadn't gone to college, so I'd been working for several years already, and it seemed unlikely that my life would undergo any drastic changes. For this reason, I never felt the need to move far from home. At that age, my girlfriend and I had just moved into my childhood home, which my parents had generously left me as my first residence. It's an old stone house that my father had inherited from his parents when he was about 40, allowing me to keep it in the family. The building had undergone some renovations over the years, but you could still feel its age. It was the stone walls that gave it away. There are very few houses like this in our area, so it stands out like a misplaced element. I've always liked this aspect, it makes it special. Our area is immersed in woods, so the houses are quite far apart. Our house is the last on the road, so it borders the forest on 2 sides instead of just one. The forest is immense, truly boundless. As a child, my brothers and I would often explore it, but despite our endless wanderings, we never managed to map it completely. I imagine many would find this situation unsettling, but I've always loved wild nature, so for me, it wasn't a problem. Besides, I'm a person who appreciates independence, so living isolated in my corner of the world seemed pleasant. My girlfriend and I had been living there for a few months when it all began. It was winter, I don't remember the exact month. I only know there was snow on the ground. It was around 8 in the morning on a Sunday, the only day of the week when I could sleep in. I was about to get into my car to go for a coffee, as I did every Sunday, when I noticed something strange in the driveway next to the car, what looked like a trail of footprints in the snow. My first thought was that my girlfriend had woken up before me without my noticing and had gone out to the driveway for some reason. But the more I observed the situation, the more I realized it was impossible. The trail crossed the front yard and passed through a gap in the side fence, which meant that the footprints came from the forest. Moreover, the track didn't lead toward our house, so they couldn't have been left by my girlfriend. I remember standing there, completely confused. The trail didn't go around the house or approach any windows, but led directly to the driver's side door of my car. This meant someone had walked directly from the forest to my car, only to immediately turn around and go straight back into the forest. It was bizarre. Later that day, I asked my girlfriend if she knew anything about it, but of course, it wasn't her. I wish I could provide more details about this first episode, but it was so long ago that this is all I remember. At least 2 winters passed before something else happened. I specifically remember it was 2015 because it was the year my Seahawks lost the Super Bowl to Tom Brady. I woke up that morning and headed to my car. I think it was a weekday, but I'm not certain. As soon as I went outside, I instantly knew something was wrong. There were footprints everywhere. In the driveway, near all the windows, along the perimeter of the house. The garden was completely covered with them. I'm a rather balanced person, so I can't say I started to panic, but I would be lying if I said I remained completely calm at that moment. I was already late for work, so I didn't have time to inspect the footprints carefully, but I didn't want to leave my girlfriend in a potentially dangerous situation. I quickly ran around the house and yard to make sure no one was hiding on the property, but that was all I could do in the limited time I had. As I was leaving the driveway, I sent a message to my girlfriend to inform her of the situation, so she wouldn't be scared. I ended up leaving work early that day, mainly because I couldn't get the situation out of my head. When I got home, my girlfriend had made some shocking discoveries. As soon as I arrived, she led me into the garden and pointed to one of the tracks, saying it had troubled her all day. At first, I was confused, but then I understood what she was talking about. None of the footprints showed any signs of shoes. I felt like an idiot for not noticing it earlier. Whoever had left those footprints had been walking barefoot. I was speechless. Who the hell would walk barefoot in freezing temperatures? My girlfriend suggested that perhaps it was some kind of animal, but the footprints seemed genuinely human. We went inside and called my father, but he said he had never experienced anything like this in all his years living in that house. He advised me to take my rifle and try to track whoever had left those footprints. I really didn't want to do it, but I knew it was my responsibility. My girlfriend wanted to call the police, but I knew it would be useless. We had no evidence that a crime had been committed, and I didn't think a simple trespass would justify a search. I told her I would call the police if I found something in the woods, and she agreed. As I said before, that forest is a world unto itself. I promised myself I would turn back as soon as the sun started to set. I put my rifle over my shoulder and left. I must have been following the trail for about 30 minutes when I noticed something really strange. Apparently out of nowhere, the trail split into two diverging paths. I didn't know which one to follow. I didn't even know that was possible. I thought that maybe whoever had left the trail had backtracked to confuse me. But then a more disturbing thought hit me. Was there more than one person out there? I had assumed I was tracking just one person this whole time. The possibility that there might be multiple people hadn't even crossed my mind. This was enough to shake me. I didn't feel comfortable knowing I might be outnumbered. I stood there a while longer before deciding to turn back. It was getting dark anyway. As I was returning, I couldn't help but think about those footprints. I felt that I would have noticed if two people had tried to walk in the same footprints. There was no way the person behind could do it without making at least one mistake. And then I thought that maybe someone had walked backward from deeper in the woods to make it seem like there had been two people all along. And then there was the possibility that it was just one person who had doubled back on their own tracks. Maybe someone had been carrying another person on their back and had simply gotten tired. I didn't know which explanation was the most disturbing. We ended up calling the police that night, but as I had predicted, they told us they couldn't do much without definitive evidence of a crime. I told my girlfriend I would go back into the woods the next morning, but it snowed heavily that night, so there were no more footprints to follow. My girlfriend was obviously terrified, but there was nothing we could do. Fortunately, that was the last incident that winter. In fact, nothing happened for several years after that, to the point where we had almost forgotten the whole thing. Meanwhile, many things had happened. My girlfriend and I had officially gotten engaged, and we were focusing on other matters. I wouldn't be writing this story if it ended there, though. What I'm about to tell you happened less than a year ago. It was just after the new year, so January of this year. One ordinary morning, I woke up and found footprints all over the property, just like before. All the memories came flooding back. My fiancé had a breakdown in our bedroom, asking me if we would ever escape this nightmare. I didn't know what to tell her. This time it was even worse. There were footprints leading to my tool shed, and many tools were missing. God only knows what else those people had done. I was furious. I called my friend Maxwell, explained the situation, and asked if he could help me. He's a wilderness expert and a much more experienced hunter than I am, which is partly why I asked for his help. He agreed and came to my house. Several hours later, my fiancée was sick with worry, but I promised her that Maxwell and I would be able to handle ourselves. We dressed for the cold and equipped ourselves, knowing we might be out for hours. The reason I wasn't worried about the darkness this time was that Maxwell had an expensive thermal scope for his rifle, which would allow us to see even in low visibility conditions. I've never spent that much money on hunting equipment, so I would still be blind, but it was certainly comforting to know that at least one of us would be able to see. I don't want to sugarcoat reality, I was quite scared when we set out. At first, Maxwell and I talked as we walked, but after 45 minutes, we were mostly silent. It's as if the seriousness of the situation had hit us both simultaneously. I remember praying to God that I hadn't dragged Maxwell into a horrible situation. I'm not sure how long we walked after that, but eventually, the tracks once again split into two sets of footprints. We followed the one on the left for a few minutes, but at a certain point, the trail abruptly stopped. We retraced our steps back to the fork, and Maxwell commented that whoever had left the tracks really didn't want to be followed. I didn't want to think about it, so we just continued following the footprints in silence. I'm not kidding, there were at least 3 other dead ends that forced us to retrace our steps, making us lose precious daylight. I remember thinking how extraordinary it was that someone could walk backwards so perfectly that a trail of footprints didn't look like it had been stepped on multiple times. I assure you, it wasn't normal. The only upside, which Maxwell pointed out, was that the dead ends probably meant we were tracking just one person. Eventually, it started to get dark. At that point, we were deep in the woods. I didn't recognize the surroundings at all. The footprint trail hadn't diverged for a long time, and Maxwell said that whoever we were tracking had probably given up trying to create dead ends. About 5 more minutes passed, and the footprints started to become noticeably deeper. We were getting closer. At one point, another set of footprints appeared right next to the original one. Maxwell cursed and whispered that he had been wrong and that we were probably tracking 2 people. The sun had practically set by now, so Maxwell was checking his scope every so often. The snow gave me some visibility, but to be honest, I probably would have turned back if it hadn't been for Maxwell's scope. We were walking in complete silence. Out of nowhere, I felt Maxwell's arm press against my chest, signaling me to stop. I looked at him, and he was looking straight ahead through his scope. I couldn't see what he was looking at, so I continued to observe him. He seemed to be holding his breath. I had never seen him so still. After a good 20 seconds, he slowly moved toward the nearest tree and crouched down. I followed suit, without even questioning why. He looked through his scope again, and I could see his hand begin to tremble slightly. Another 20 seconds of complete silence. I was dying of curiosity, so I lightly tapped his shoulder. He lowered his rifle and silently handed it to me. I looked through the scope and had to hold back a scream. There were 4 figures crouched in the snow. At first, I thought they were bears, but I quickly realized they weren't. They were human beings. 2 of them were large and hunched over, and the other 2 were smaller. The smaller ones were clinging to a nearby tree, wildly shaking their heads. They were eating something. I couldn't make out faces or details, thermal scopes don't give you that. But I could see enough to know they were naked. It was the most terrifying thing I've ever seen with my own eyes. Eventually, the larger ones took the smaller ones from the tree and placed them on their shoulders. Then they began to walk deeper into the woods. Maxwell and I remained hidden behind that tree for what seemed like an hour. We didn't dare move until we were sure those creatures could no longer hear us. When we returned home, hours later, I was surprised to find my fiancée still awake. She told me she couldn't sleep knowing I was out there and asked what we had found. I told her in as few details as possible, but she was still horrified. I called the police that night, and they told us they would search the woods the following morning. Maxwell agreed to stay the night so that both of us could assist the police in their search. The next morning, the police searched the woods with our help but called it off after a few hours due to the partially covered footprints. My fiancé demanded that they continue searching, but they said they couldn't authorize a large-scale search just for some missing tools. I don't blame them, but I didn't feel satisfied. Maxwell and I knew what we had seen. Winter is fast approaching, and both my fiancé and I are worried that those people might come back. We're seriously considering moving, but we haven't yet been able to set this process in motion. I really don't know what to think. As I said before, I've told everyone I could about what has been happening to us. It has literally been going on for years. None of my neighbors has ever experienced anything like this, which makes no sense to me. I don't know why my house is being targeted or what those people want. Some of my friends think they're harmless, but others tell me I'm in grave danger. I think I'll try to seal off my garden from the forest, but I don't know what else to do besides that. Hopefully, we can move soon. I don't think I'll ever forget what happened to me in the northern woods. It's been almost 10 years now, but every time I close my eyes, I can still hear those crackling whispers coming through the radio. I worked as an industrial chainsaw operator in the dense forests of northern Oregon. It was a solitary and dangerous job, but it paid well, especially when we were compensated by the number of trees felled rather than by the hour. This often pushed me to work up to 16, sometimes 20 hours straight, particularly when I was teamed up with Ethan, another operator with whom I alternated shifts. We communicated via radio, a necessity when working at opposite ends of the same logging site. That spring, the company assigned us to a particularly remote job, on the slopes of a mountain so isolated that it took 3 weeks just to create a road wide enough for trucks to reach the site. We were already 10 days into the job, making good progress, when we started hearing strange mutterings through our radios. At first, they were just indistinguishable sounds, like whispers muffled by static. We tried changing channels, but those voices followed us everywhere. Anyone who has used a standard radio knows how disturbing this is. It should be impossible for someone to follow you when you change frequency. The higher we climbed the mountain, the clearer the voices became. We couldn't make out entire conversations, but Ethan and I agreed that the tone of those fragments of speech had something deeply wrong about it. Sometimes it seemed almost casual, normal, but the words remained incomprehensible, like a distorted foreign language. We also began finding unsettling signs that someone had been there before us, abandoned containers, footprints in the ground, and small makeshift camps. In such a remote, practically inaccessible place, these discoveries were deeply disturbing. No one should have been up there. One afternoon, while mapping a new sector to fell, Ethan called me on the radio. He had found a tent hidden just off a trail. We decided to investigate together. Inside, we found a single sleeping bag and a duffel bag full of the most disturbing things imaginable, multiple pairs of children's underwear, duct tape, ropes, and horrifying sketches of bound children. There were even photographs with a fresh apple, indicating that whoever owned that tent had been there recently. Ethan wanted to pack up and leave immediately. I, always work-obsessed, insisted on finishing the job. We agreed to limit radio communications to emergencies only. That night, sitting in the camper, unable to shake off the dread that oppressed us, the radio crackled again. This time we could make out fragments of a conversation between two men. They were talking about mundane things, collecting water and firewood, but the realization that these men were probably connected to the tent sent chills down my spine. The following night, I decided to confront them. When I heard them talking about gathering branches for a fire, I grabbed the radio and asked who they were and what they were doing up there. The radio went silent immediately, and the men didn't respond. That silence was almost more unnerving than the chatter. The next day, around midnight, Ethan woke me up whispering that there was someone outside the camper. The first thing I noticed was the soft sound of footsteps crunching on the gravel. With my heart pounding in my chest, I fumbled for my gun, only to realize it wasn't loaded. I had no idea where the ammunition was. Ethan was unarmed, and the idea of calling the police was ridiculous given our location. We both remained motionless as we heard the camper door handle moving. The door creaked, but didn't fully open. Our camper was high off the ground, and there was no ladder or stool to climb up. Then came the scratching, long deliberate scratches along the outside of the door. 4 agonizing minutes passed. Finally, I nodded to Ethan, indicating I was going to check it out. I moved silently toward the door, gripping a flashlight in my trembling hand. Just as I reached the door, it burst open, and I was struck across the face with a knife. The pain blinded me. I fell out of the camper, hitting the ground hard. Before I could recover, a man was on top of me, pressing the knife against my neck. Another man appeared, repeatedly kicking me in the head. Ethan, without hesitation, leaped out of the camper and tackled the man with the knife. The second man fled into the darkness, and the one Ethan had tackled got to his feet and followed. They disappeared into the forest. Ethan helped me back into the truck, and we drove for 2 hours to the nearest hospital. It was serious. My face was a bloody mess, and there was a cut across my eyes so severe that it permanently damaged my vision. We reported the attack to the police, but nothing came of it. 2 weeks later, while the rest of the logging crew finished the job, one of our colleagues was found bound, gagged, raped, and murdered in a ditch. No one was ever arrested. To this day, I struggle with post-traumatic stress disorder. My right eye, with its deformed pupil, constantly reminds me of that night. I'm sure I haven't had a night of peaceful sleep since then. The deep forest, once my workplace, has become my personal nightmare, a stretch of trees where radio whispers still haunt me in the silence.